The dust came up in a long brown veil behind the wagon, and for a time it was all Eli Mercer could see of the town, just that drifting cloud, glowing like smoke in the late sun. The wheels creaked, the mule snorted, and the iron rims rang softly. On stone, where the road hardened, Eli sat sideways on the seat, one boot hooked under the rail, reins loose in his hand. He rode without hurry. He always did. When the wagon rolled out of the dust, the town appeared the way frontier towns always did, like it had been dropped there by accident and forgotten. A handful of false front buildings crouched along the road. A church with a bell that had never rung, a saloon with its doors thrown wide as if it were breathing, corrals a livery. And beyond it all, the land opened and went on forever, pale and empty and patient. The sign said, "Red Hollow." Eli had not meant to stop. He rarely meant to stop anywhere. But the mule needed water, and Eli's own throat felt like it had been rubbed with sand. He drew the wagon in near the hitching rail and stepped down. The heat pressed close, as if the air itself had weight. Somewhere a hammer rang. Somewhere else laughter cut off abruptly. Let it drink, the mule to the trough. Let it drink. The animals. Flanks quivered. Eli watched the water darken with dust and spit. He rested one hand on the mule's neck, the other hanging loose at his side. His revolver rode low on his hip, worn smooth at the grip. He had carried it for years. It was a habit like breathing. When he turned back toward the street, he saw the crowd. They were gathered near the old stock pens at the far end of town, men mostly. A few women stood back, stiff and quiet. Men were close, hats tipped forward, hands shoved into belts. Eli watched them for a long moment. Something about the way they stood made the hair rise on his arms. He tied the mule and walked. The sun struck his shoulders hard. Sweat crept down his spine. As he drew closer, he heard voices, low, eager, sharp, with something like hunger. A man called out a number. Another laughed. Coins clinked. Eli stopped at the edge of the crowd. In the pen stood a woman. She was tall, taller than most men there. Her hair was dark and braided down her back. Her dress was plain and torn at the hem, the fabric stained with dust and sweat. Her hands were bound in front of her with rope. She stood straight anyway, chin lifted, eyes steady. A man stood beside her, hand on her arm as if she were a horse. He wore a black coat despite the heat and had a gold watch chain across his belly. His voice carried. "Strong as any hand you'll find," he was saying. "Worked cattle. Broke colts, hauled stone. Ain't afraid of weather or work. Should earn her keep." A murmur went through the men. Eli's jaw tightened. He said nothing. The sheriff stood off to one side, leaning against a post. Star caught the light. He chewed on a toothpick and watched as if this were no business of his. Two deputies lounged nearby, rifles slung, eyes drifting. $20, someone called. $25, another answered. The man in black nodded, pleased. The way the woman's gaze flicked across the crowd. For an instant, her eyes met Eli's. There was no pleading in them. Just something like recognition. Like she had already measured him and found him wanting or not. Eli felt a pull in his chest that had nothing to do with breath. 30, a voice said. Laughter followed. The man in black raised a hand. 35, the sheriff spit. Eli stepped forward. The men nearest him turned, surprised. Eli took off his hat. He held it loose in his hands. His hair was dark with gray at the temples. His face was lined, not old, but used. His eyes were calm. "What's her name?" he asked. The man in black frowned. "That ain't part of the sale." Eli nodded once. "It ought to be." A few men chuckled. Someone said, "You buyin', stranger?" Eli did not look at him. He kept his eyes on the woman. She said nothing. The man in black cleared his throat. "Name's Anna," he said finally. "Now 40, reached into his pocket. He drew out a small leather pouch. He opened it, poured the contents into his palm. Coins caught the sun. 50, Eli said. The sound of it fell into the crowd like a stone into water. The man in black blinked. The sheriff straightened. Murmurs rippled outward. 50, the man said, smiling thin. Well now, that's I'll pay now, Eli said. And I'll take her. A pause. The man in black glanced at the sheriff. The sheriff shrugged. Sold, the man said quickly, before anyone else could speak. Eli stepped forward. He handed over the coins. The man weighed them in his palm, satisfied. He cut the rope at the woman's wrists and gave Eli a shove toward her. She's yours, he said. Eli stood there, hat in his hands. The woman rubbed. Her wrists flexed her fingers. She did not look at him. Come on, someone called. Let's drink. The crowd broke apart, interest spent. The sheriff wandered off, the pen emptied. Eli and the woman stood alone. For a long moment neither spoke. Dust drifted, fly buzzed. Finally, Eli said, You don't have to come with me. She turned then. Her eyes were dark, steady. Close, he saw the bruises on her arms, the way her lip had split and healed wrong. They say I belong to you, she said. They're wrong, Eli said. You're free. A flicker crossed her face, something like disbelief, something like anger. Free where? She asked. Eli had no answer ready. He rarely did. I've got a camp a mile out, he said after a moment. Water. Shade. You can rest. Tomorrow, if you want, you can go wherever you like. She studied him.
Us.
Stretched. The town noises drifted back. The saloon piano a shout, a hammer striking wood. You paid $50, she said. Men don't do that for nothing. Eli met her gaze. I know. She watched him a while longer. Then she nodded once. All right, she said. But if you're lying, I won't stop you, Eli said. A hint of a smile touched her mouth. It was gone as quick as it came. They walked out of Red Hollow together. The land beyond town rose gently, scattered with scrub and rock. Eli led, not too close. He could feel her presence behind him, watchful. They did not speak. At the camp, Eli set to work without comment. He unhitched the mule, set feed, drew water. The camp was simpler bedroll, a fire ring, a canvas shade stretched between poles. He handed her a canteen. She drank deeply, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Anna, she said, after a time, that's not my name. Eli nodded. All right, she studied him again. You got one? He hesitated. Eli. They sat in the shade as the sun slid lower. Eli made coffee. The smell drifted, rich and bitter. He offered her a tin cup. She took it. Their fingers brushed. She did not pull away. You could have bought a horse, she said quietly. I've got one, Eli said. She sipped. You could have bought land, Eli shrugged. Don't need it. She watched him. You could have walked on. Eli did not answer. That night, they ate beans and bread. The sky darkened. Stars came out, sharp and cold. Coyotes called in the distance. Anna lay on one bedroll, Eli on another a few feet away. The fire burned low. You ever been married? She asked into the dark. Eli stared up at the stars once. What happened? He closed his eyes. She died. I'm sorry, she said. It did not sound like a habit. Silence settled again. Later, when the fire was just coals, Anna spoke softly. They took me out of the mountains. Eli opened his eyes. He did. Not turn, my people, she went on. We lived high. Sheep. Stone houses. Snow, even in summer sometimes. She laughed quietly. I came down once for salt. That's all. They said they'd trade. Eli listened. The night held still. They killed my brother, she said. Shot him when he ran. Said it was an accident. Eli's hand curled. Into the dirt, they said. I owed them, she said. For the trouble. The words hung there. I tried to escape, she said. 3 times Eli turned then. He looked at her face in the starlight. She was watching the sky, not him. They broke my hand, she said, lifting it. The fingers bent a little wrong. Eli felt something shift inside him, slow and heavy. I'm going back up, she said. When I can. Eli nodded. I can help. She turned her head. Why? Eli thought of his wife, of the small grave with no marker, of the night he had left that place and never looked back. "Because I can," he said. In the morning, Red Hollow came for them. It was the sheriff and his deputies. The dust of their horses rose long before they arrived. Eli saw them coming and stood. He rested one hand near his gun, not on it. The sheriff reined in, smiling thin. "Morning," he said. "We got a problem." Eli said nothing. The sheriff looked at Anna. "She's property," he said. "Sold legal." Eli shook his head. "No." The sheriff's smile faded. "You think you can just—" Eli drew his gun and fired into the dirt at the sheriff's feet. The report cracked the air. The horses reared. "Leave," Eli said. The deputies stared. The sheriff's face went pale, then red. "You'll hang for this," he said. "Maybe," Eli said, "but not today." The sheriff looked at Anna again. Something unreadable crossed his face. He spat. "Come on," he said to the deputies. They turned and rode back toward town. Anna let out a breath she had been holding. "You didn't have to do that," she said. Eli holstered his gun. "Yes," he said. "I did." They left before noon. The journey back to the mountains was slow. Anna's foot troubled her. Eli walked more than he rode, leading the mule. They shared water, food. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they did not. They were followed. Eli knew it the second night when the firelight flickered wrong. He woke Anna with a touch. They doused the fire and waited. The men came near dawn. There were three. One was the man in black. One was a deputy. The third Eli did not know. They crept in, guns drawn. Eli rose from the dark and shot the deputy first. The man went down without a sound. The other two fired wildly. One bullet tore through Eli's sleeve. He did not feel it. Anna grabbed a rock and struck the man in black when he stumbled past her. He fell, stunned. The third man ran. Eli stood over the man in black, gun steady. "You should have walked away," Eli said. The man whimpered. Eli fired once. The echo rolled through the hills. They buried the bodies shallowly. There was no time for more. Eli's arm bled. Anna bound it with torn cloth. Her hands were steady. "You could still turn back," she said. Eli shook his head. "No." They reached the mountains 2 days later. The air cooled. Pines replaced scrub. Snow gleamed on distant peaks. At the edge of a high meadow, Anna stopped. "This is it," she said. She turned to him. For the first time, uncertainty touched her face. "You won't come farther," she said. Eli nodded. "No." She stepped closer. She stood very still, then said softly, almost as a challenge, "You're going to bed with me tonight." Eli met her eyes. He saw the fear there, and the need to choose on her own terms. "No," he said gently. "I'm not." She stared at him. Something like shock crossed her face. Then something else, relief perhaps, or sorrow. She nodded. All right. They stood there a long moment. The wind moved through the grass. "Thank you," she said finally. Eli watched her walk away, up into the trees until she was gone. He turned his mule and headed back down. Red Hollow would remember him, maybe hunt him, maybe forget. Eli did not look back. The land opened before him, wide and empty, and for the first time in a long while, it did not feel like a sentence. He walked into it, quiet as dust,